there. Today I thought I'd take the opportunity, because it's Easter, to try what I thought was an appropriate wine. This is Tony Bish's Golden Egg Chardonnay from Hawke's Bay, and it's the 2021 vintage of this. Tony Bish, a winemaker who's had an incredibly long career in New Zealand producing Chardonnay, and has been quite an influential producer. He started working in the early 80s for Corban's, their vineyards in Gisborne, and then in 1986 he along with the Mason brothers founded Sacred Hill, quite an important producer of their Rifleman Chardonnay, for instance, is quite a classic Hawke's Bay Chardonnay. He went on after that to become the chief winemaker at Rippon, overlooking Lake Wanaka, beautiful winery there. He founded and established a winery in the Christchurch area, in Canterbury, before coming back in 1994 to become the chief winemaker at Sacred Hill again. He was there until, I believe, about 2013, when he decided to set up his own winery. As a result of a trip to South America, he discovered the idea of egg fermenters, which weren't particularly new to South America, having been first thought of by Michel Chapoutier in the Rhone Valley, and Chapoutier, being an organic and biodynamic producer, had reasoned that the shape of an egg allows the convection currents to flow without turbulence, and so his reasoning was that this would give a very well integrated style of wine, and so this appears to be the case. Having looked at the cost of importing these concrete eggs that sort of weighed several tons from South America, I think initially, Tony decided that actually the best answer would be to try and make them in New Zealand. So he teamed up with Josh Winters of New Zealand Tanks, who made concrete water tanks in Hastings, and 2 years later, in 2015, they completed their first concrete egg. So I understand that Tony now has 5 of these concrete eggs, with which he makes this golden egg wine, and he also owns a wooden egg made by the Tonneliers, the Coopers, Taranso, from which he makes his Zen Chardonnay, which is top of the range. So the influence of the egg is thought to be that not just the convection currents and the fact that the fluid, as a fermentation goes on, obviously there's heat, so you get these currents of rising liquid, and as it warms and then reaches the top, cools and falls back down again. The fact that this is a smooth transition, and also the fact that there's plenty of surface area for the yeasts to sit on once fermentation has finished and break down and give yeasty aromas and flavours to the Chardonnay, which it benefits from as these yeasts break down. Also, you've got quite a control over sort of thermal load with an egg. These are made of concrete that's something like about 7 centimetres thick, so it warms up slowly, it cools down slowly, so your fermentation reactions and malolactic conversion presumably are all aided by the fact that warmth is retained in the concrete structure of the egg. This particular wine, I understand, is made from Mendoza clone. Mendoza, one of the earlier quality Chardonnay clones found in New Zealand. Most of the early quality clonal planting is Mendoza clone, and Mendoza is famous for the fact that you have what's called hen and chick. It'll set some of its berries that are absolutely tiny and don't develop to full size, and the benefit is that if you leave those in the ferment, you'll get a lovely sort of sharp, crisp acidity coming from those. So it sort of tends to be quite sort of fresh and lemony in style, and also it means that it's likely that these are from older plantings. I understand that fruit for some of the earlier vintages of this has come from the British Park Triangle. I don't know if this is from the same vineyard, but I would assume that that's a likely fruit source. The grapes are hand-picked. I believe they may well ferment with ambient yeasts, but again, I don't have that for certain. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we, and see what the results are like. First thing to say, you've got a sort of a medium lemon yellow colour there, maybe almost sort of heading slightly towards a sort of a strawy note. It's maybe not quite got the bursting youthfulness that it might have done a little earlier. I mean, this is just over 2 years old now. Let's have a look at the aromas, shall we? Now the aromas are complex. They're not showing the sort of the ripe, peachy fruit you might expect from a sort of a full-on New World Chardonnay. This is much more. I mean, there is a delicate peachiness there, but with citric notes, fresh lemoniness, but also overlaid by a mineral struck match fermentation aroma. Now that's what makes me think this has possibly had at least a percentage of spontaneous fermentation going on there. There's an overlaying saline quality to this, and also there are creamy notes as well, which I suppose is the coming from the decomposing yeasts in the eggs there as well. There isn't particularly a heavy or strong note of either oak, so there's not a vanilla overlaying there or a cedriness, but also there's not an obvious rich butterscotchy note from a lot of malolactic conversion. There is some creaminess, but I'm not thinking this is getting to the sort of the really sort of lots of melted butter to butterscotch notes. So a taste. The wine's medium bodied. It's actually quite lean. It's quite a sort of a long angular style. It's not particularly sharp. I mean, it's got good acidity, but it's not mouth-watering in that there's a roundness to the acidity. There's also a purity. Everything very, very well integrated. I suppose there's no oak sticking out over the top of this. So there are notes of sort of less ripe peach. There's notes of butteriness, creaminess. There are saline hints quite clearly. There's a lovely persistence to the fruit, to be honest. It's not bursting and juicy, but the flavours are carrying on beautifully. The alcohol is only 13.5%, which is not particularly high for Chardonnay, and so the finish is nicely balanced. There's not a sort of a heat there. It's allowing the crisp Chardonnay fruit to continue showing, and there's a little bit of lemoniness on the finish as well. I think this is a wine that actually needs a little time, maybe a year or two, just to allow that fruit to open out a bit more. But stylistically, I mean, it makes me think of a Pernod Vergelès or something like that from the Côte de Beaune. That sort of less oaked, more pure fruit style that you get with some of the sort of the wines that are just bone wines, as opposed to sort of the more flashy wines from, say, Chassagne or Polini or something like this. This has got nice, self-assured intensity of flavour, and as I say, I think it will develop with time, but I think it's a very enjoyable wine now. So thank you very much for watching. I do hope you find it enjoyable. Do feel free to like and share, and hopefully you'll watch again. Bye now.